Hi, this is Brian McHenry of McHenry Software. This is going to be a reference set of the various menus and commands and how-to for our version 3.2 of the software. We will also be posting on our forum a link and also in the help files. So to begin with, we're going to show you how to get to those so that you can easily find a task that you need to do. First item is from the main website. When you go to McHenry Software, up in Support, you click McHenry Forum. And now from the McHenry Forum, there's an msmac3D license notes, which should have it. Like you notice there's some like how to use the Polygon collision interaction. And you notice we have at each time certain tasks that you can click on a task and it'll show you how to do it. You can obviously watch the whole thing, but if you watch it, then to go back, instead of having to remember where you saw how to do something, this is so we have a quick reference. There's also the option on how to make movies. And then there's going to be this one, which will be the reference set of commands, etc. It's also covered in the help file. If you go here, help movie click, there's help documents. And if you go to getting started, that brings up the getting started manual. And this will be slightly different because we're going to be adding a few more things. But you look, a couple items of importance in there is one, how to download demos. There's these demos here with descriptions that you just simply click on a demo and it'll say where do you want to save it. I generally save it to the download directory, and then when we go over the restore, we'll show you how to restore from a zip file backup or any file that you create. Then also under demos and tutorials, you see that there's all of these, which is basically a repeat of a lot of that, but then there's going to be some additional items because underneath the online help videos, there's going to be a reference set for version 3.2. This video, which will have a list of quick links to each and every item that's covered in this video. That way you can simply search it and jump to a topic or a how-to, etc. So like for example, let's go to how-to movies. You see, let's just say I needed to know how about creating a driver's side view. I click on driver's side view, it jumps out to, and then when you click a view from a car. And how you do that is, you see that it then will walk you through the steps. Anytime you need further clarification or have any questions or problems with something, please send us an email or give us a call and we will quickly respond and post up. Also on the forum, you have the licensee only technical support. That's also where you have installation and update, and there'll be a 3.2 normally here or up in the top, but then also as a release goes out, if there's any minor changes or minor additions, we put notes here. If you also go back to the tech support, there's announcements. That's what's going to appear when you click on the help file, check for update from 3D graphics. You notice that it has a list of what install versions you have and what available versions. With this latest update, it will also let you know when there's a full update. Currently, you have to actually see that it's a like version 3.4, or you'll get an email from our automatic email notification, but it will notify you of the update being available. Jumping back to the main licensee only tech support, also make sure in addition to the installation update and notes on that, msmac3D, if you have tech support questions, when you send them in, we post up if they're of general interest. We post them up anonymously. Notice there's announcements. One thing on the forum in general is there's on the top there's always announcements, which are like to go to the msmac3D manual. Obviously you can hit F1 when you're running msmac3D, but you can also go here and go to it if you happen to be just at a computer and want to look up something or traveling or something like that. There's also some information of general interest here. Then we have the specific topics. There's also mEdit 3D and 3D graphics. For our msmac2D users, there's questions for the msmac2D. There's mEdit 32, which is discontinued, but if any of you are still using it, we try to support it. And then the 2D graphics and animation. Going back to the forum index, another place that you should probably make a point of checking out is our crash reconstruction topics. You notice we have what is, and if ever there's questions, we add obviously anything. What's restitution, what's coefficient restitution, very similar, but what is a side slap, etc., etc. And then we also have on general reconstruction analysis, we have SMAC collision simulation. crash, momentum, damage, etc., etc. You see the topics. You notice there's quite a few topics. Anytime you send information or send a question, we anonymize it. Then, of course, there's McHenry Software News and others. But you basically, I guess the point of this is when using the forum, you have a forum index, and then you can go to specific sub-index, and it lists it. So let's go through the menus. First menu, on the top, you have a bunch of icons. You have the view icon here, and then down below, you have icons. To start, one of the things we have is project menu. So you have project open, new project, clone project, backup project, restore project, and open project folder. For open project, you'll notice that it brings up a dialog where you can create a new, which is also over here. You can do the direct. You can create a new. It keeps recent. Now, when you do an update, the recents disappear, but the projects are still there. It's just that it does not retain it because we've updated the database that fills this. You also have parent folders, and the basic parent folders that you may see on yours are projects, demos 3D, demos 2D. But then I have on my computer, I keep in a lot of different locations items like our validations, our some older projects, some like Z backup, etc. And there's locations so that this, like right now with the parent folder, you see there's quite a lot of projects in here, and you may want to separate it, like for a particular case file or particular subject matter or something. So this way you can create parent folders, and you add a parent folder simply by just click on add parent folder, and it says create a parent folder, and you go out and find where you have projects, and then that will add it to it. You also have the ability to simply browse, and this just allows you to go out and browse and find projects wherever you may have them. But generally the one you will use is the recents or the parent folder. Next on the item is the new project. And we'll probably go through a new project at some point once I go through all these items. But when you start a new project, it gives you a new project name as a default, and then you can change that to whatever you want. If you try to use the same name as an existing project, it asks you to change that. You can obviously easily go out to your project directory or wherever you're storing it if you want to replace one and either delete or rename one, so then you can create one with the same name. But we don't want to overwrite delete things, so we want to leave it to you to delete older projects or projects that you no longer need or use. Next on the list is a zip, and that's to create a backup of your file. We've had one addition to 3.2 to this is one. The main addition is now we have the all files except zip files and then all files. Sometimes you want to do a backup of everything, even the runs, etc. But if you include zip files, every time you do a backup zip, it would make it grow exponentially. So we have it so that you can now do all files, which will include zip files, or you do all files except zip files, or you can do simply input files because you can easily rerun the simulation. There's no real reason to do that. Or you can actually select particular files. And you notice it's got some selected because it always does input, but you clear all, and then you can just back up just certain files you want to back up. You also can back up it. The default is back up in its own folder. You can change that to target zip and put it wherever you want to do it. You can create where you want it. The default also is to add the date and time so you know when it was done. You can either remove that if you don't want it. And then if you plan on trying to email it, if it's greater than probably 20 megs, you may need to upload it. And we have a way to do that, and I'll show that in a moment. But you basically would add a suffix support because zip files, a lot of mail servers will not let zip files go through because someone can put a crazy file in there. Now we mentioned a DropBox location in the McHenry forum, which again, as we mentioned, you can go from the main site or from just typing in mchenrysoftware.com/board. But in the McHenry forum, if you go to msmac licensee notes, there's a topic up here called How to Send Files the Easy Way. You click on that. There's some discussion of what you need to send or you might want to send. And down here, there's a Dropbox link. When you click on that Dropbox link, it'll open Dropbox links and you can add files, browse out to whatever, because generally you would go and create a zip file and then you'd browse out and add that zip file to the Dropbox. Next on our list is Restore, and that's where you can browse out and you look for projects. Like we happen to have the backup project. And now if let's just say I went, two items that you could do is, let's just say you happen to, my first project got corrupted or didn't have anything in it. You can go to Help Documents, Getting Started, and you can either go through the Download Demos Online, or you can go to the Demos and Tutorials. And if you go to My First Project, there's a download, there's a link there. Download Demos Online, there's a link here. And all that does is that downloads that file and either save it to somewhere you want, or I just save mine to the download directory. So then to restore that, you would simply go out to Restore Project, click on it. Now you notice that it selects all input files. You can select all files, or you can select individual files. In other words, you can clear it and say, I just want to bring in an SI5 file to replace that, or something like that. And let's just say for this we want it, we'll go ahead and we'll say all files. Let's restore all files that are in there. We say restore and open. Now, the problem here is we have My First Project open, and so it doesn't want to restore because it's afraid that you will overwrite things. So all you need to do for that is just go out and open a different project. If you want to replace your My First Project or whatever project you've done a backup, so we just open up a project that's out there, and then we go out and we say restore again, and we browse to, and of course mine is pointed to download, so you browse to that, and then we say let's go ahead and just do the input files, and we're saying we want it in that same location. You can change the target parent folder also to where you want to restore things, but then we just say restore and open. And now it notices that you have something out there with the same name, and it's saying this already exists. We're going to delete what's in there and create this. We will not delete zip files and DXF files, but we will delete it. And so we say yes, go ahead, and it's restored. Most demos, there's no problem with you restoring it, but you should use a clone to create a new project. Like let's say I had something that's similar to this and I want to use this as a backlog. Now of course there's no output file in here right now, so let's just run this so you can see it. So again, we have the demo as it is initially distributed. If you made some changes, you could restore that one. And so it allows you to maintain your projects. Now, one other thing very important and something that we think about, reusability. We have a bunch of demo projects out there. Will be creating projects. We have the clone ability. You open a project and you say clone. And then we can just call this alternative to My First Project. And so we want to just choose the input file, so we say clone and open. Now if you look up on the top, you see that it has that, but we're going to make a change. So let's just say instead of 40 each, we're going to make them 50 miles an hour each. It's going to be a different scenario, but so now we just simply run. You see we have quite a different reconstruction. We can actually move to see what's happening here. But now that's what's called alternative to My First Project. So that covers the project menu. The next item is the scenario tweak. What that does is we have here alternative to My First Project. Anytime you want to make a copy, or let's just say you have something and you want to do an alternative scenario, or you're just what we call tweaking or trying to match evidence, you want to make it a little better, you just click the plus. When we click the plus, it automatically adds an 01, but you could add something else like alternative to My First Project slower. Because remember we changed that. Or instead of slower, we can even put what it is. That was at 50 and 50. We'll go to 30 versus 30 for the speeds. So we click on that. Now you notice no path is found, so we're going to close and then go out and change that input file, since rerunning it would just rerun the one you just cloned. And you can double click on this to go back to the original, or you click on this to go to the new one. So you close no path. Then we go and we say 30. I didn't hit enter, but you can click either hit here or hit the enter key, and that creates 30. So now we run it. And there's a result at 30 and 30. Now you can at any time go back to your tweak and go back to the other one, and you notice close and reload the existing path, or you can rerun it, make some changes to it. So it's kind of a keeping track of what runs you have, etc. When you're doing the scenario tweak. Next is the input card editor. For those of you who are familiar with msmac, we have the grid that used to be the way that you loaded it, and we suggest you start up in the 3D graphics. So when you want to do grid, you notice here this is basically the same as the grid. And just to show you, up here it's very easy from 3D graphics to click and go to the grid. You notice now it's the same traditional for those of you who've been with us for a while. All the commands are available, but when you go back to graphics, you see how much faster it is. And now, so now this is basically the same without having to jump out and do that. This just does it. You make your minor changes. But if you want to expand tables, you want to make changes like that, you need to go out to the grid to do that. But this is just a quick for just making changes to speed, position. Obviously, you can also do changes to speed and position by clicking on the car and using the menu over here, which we'll discuss in a minute. But before that, we want to go through each one. So that was the msmac card editor from the 3D graphics. The next item is the simulated vehicle, where this is basically a repeat of what is by clicking on the vehicle, but sometimes if the vehicle gets obscured or you're not sure which vehicle is vehicle 1 or vehicle 2, you could just go here and go ahead and select the vehicle, or you can go and do some of the many things that are available by clicking on a vehicle directly. See, if I click on a vehicle versus if I go over here, simulated vehicle, select vehicle, you see it brings up this menu to the right, which we'll discuss in a minute. One other item we want to point out is to use polygon boundary. I would suggest you go and look at the help documents. You can either go in msmac or in getting started, but let's just go to msmac, because in msmac there's a discussion here about vehicle polygon. It's a new option we have. Original SMAC use rectangles, and that's the default currently. We may be changing it, but here is links to parts of that to show with and without rectangular polygons how you can use the actual polygon shape of the vehicle for the collision detection and interaction instead of using rectangles. Generally, this is for lower speed impacts when you're just barely missing or something, so you don't have forces before the vehicles touch. For higher speed impacts, it really doesn't make that much difference because it's probably a millisecond difference between when a rectangle would hit and the actual polygon would hit, and the forces and moments are approximately the same. So that's our menu on the vehicle. The next item up is the Animulated Vehicle option. Animulation is a combination of animation and simulation. You can add animated vehicle and a menu will come up. Easiest way to explain this is you can go to your help file, go to the Getting Started manual, and down in Demos and Tutorial, you see that there is an Animulation. This basically points you back to the form, which we've discussed already. You can click and go, here's a quick start guide for it. That goes to the form. There's also a video, quick start, and a video. Animulation equals simulation and animation, which walks you through it. Not much has been changed. If we do update it, it will be in this help file and or in a link to make a change. This was one of the first. Then the quick start actually links you back to some of the other ones, and so if there's another one, it'll be there. Going out to msmac3D, the licensee only technical support, you'll see newer topics on the top of this, but at any time on the forum you can search either throughout the whole forum or in just msmac3D and 3D graphics. But if we just put up here Animulation, all the topics come up so that you're able to get additional information. The other option on the Animulation menu is to add a CSV file. Recall that we did this run with a different speed, when you click on a vehicle, if you go over to the Edit Model option here, normally it will tell you what that model is. This was created with an older version, but that looks like that must be the Crown Vic. So we go here and we say we want to add and put another Crown Vic. So we go out to Ford Crown Vic. We add that, leave the specs there, and then we're going to go get out to remember we had alternative to my first project. We created a 40, 40, and 30, 30. Let's put a 30, 30 for that vehicle one. We say OK. Now when we play this, you see that that other vehicle is showing what the difference is between the 40 and the 30. So now we could do the same for vehicle 2. Let's go ahead and say add extension for vehicle 2. And I think that's a Lumina. Generally down here on the bottom it will tell you what the vehicle is. But let's go ahead and say add CSV path for vehicle 2. So we'll go to Chevy Lumina. Okay. But that's just so it has the specs, etc. And now vehicle 2 at 3030. We say OK. Now you watch, when we run this, it's going to show the two runs simultaneous. Little sidebar showing the demonstration between 30 and 40 miles an hour for each vehicle. Well, let's just first mention that in here, see if we click on the vehicle, you can remove that vehicle if you want. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And the same for this one. But then also there's these trees that we added in. And you notice we have number of trees here, and I could actually clone a tree. Just to show you, one way is you just click clone, you say OK, and then we can grab it. You see how there's two, we could put another one. Next up item is the add other model. Any 3D vehicle can be added, or in the objects 3D directory there are a number of items, which are some are cars and then some are items like a tree, a street light, other things, and you bring it in. When you bring one in, you need to set the scale. Some of them, like this one, seems to be set to the proper scale, but one other option is that you can go out and down on the bottom here you can tell it select the DXF, and that's where you need to set the scale. Let's go to that same one, go to a small tree. Takes a little longer for it, DXF files, and then also you notice that the scale here, so let's just say, is it inches? That's a 13 foot, that might be, but then you can bring that in and it puts it at the origin. And then you just click on that and you can move it to wherever you want to have it. And if you decide you don't want it later, you can delete it. It's just for adding things like these houses were added. Anything for a model or any of these items, you can go to 3D CAD browser and download a DXF file, or let us know, and if it's something we want to add, we'll add it for free. We just have to let us know and give us some time to get it and convert it. But for models and any of these objects, let us know. Next on the item here is add billboard. What that is, so I'm going to go to images, and you can store these wherever you want. I think in Brooksville we had some, see how there's skyline trees, and this is in one of the demos that are out there. Let's just bring in this guy here, and the width of 50, let's make that width 250. See, now it brings it in at the origin, but there you could then move that. We'll make that 100, 100. and then you can rotate it. Obviously, if you're at a scene, you take a picture of the scene. Now, if you go out to your settings, lights, you can change that angle to make that brighter. I don't see it there. There we go. And now when you are down at a certain angle, you know, obviously judicious choice of where to put it and what size to make it. I guess if we made this larger, width, make it 500 instead of 250. This is limited to 200, but this is just a way so that when you have a scene, let's go back to the ground level. Now you see how you can have the sky by judicious choice of how you want to. You can have a sky back behind there instead of just the color blue. So now when you run it, see that it looks like a sky and some other trees back there. Obviously, if you're at a scene, you can take a picture. That's the item, the billboard option. Next item is let's go ahead and get rid of that billboard for now. And go back up here. Now the next thing is what is called a friction zone. You can add polygon friction zone. When you add it, you say plus, and it's added at the origin, and you should go to like an overhead, you see? And then you can just grab those legs and put it, we're going to put this off the road here, just to make it very slippery going down here. Let's just say it was an icy condition. And you can insert like this. Let's go to full straight overhead. We could insert, let's go back, you click on that. You can add one and then move that here. And then you go and you click factor. And let's just make this a very slippery factor, 0.3. Now we'll go back down here. When we rerun it, and on these frictions you can, since it's kind of unsightly but you want to know that it's there, you can remove that. In your input echo, you go to my first project, input echo. Any polygon friction zone is listed. Notice here, polygon friction table, x mu, which is a friction multiplier, is 0.3, and then here are the x and y coordinates of that polygon friction zone. Then obviously you can remove that by just simply, first you got to make it visible, and then one can just delete it. And now when we rerun, you see it's back as we had it before. Next item, which we have covered in some of the help files hopefully you've seen, is grounds. You can add a blank terrain. You can add an image, and with the image you want to make sure you remember to scale it, and that's just by clicking on it. Like here, I just click on this and I go to picture and I say set size, and that's where I can pick some item in the field of view that I set for scale. Then we also have add terrain from a map. This is basically Google Maps. I would also recommend you go to Google Maps or Google Earth, because you can actually just get an image and then bring that image in off of this option, this other option. In other words, you can bring in that image with this. But on this, you can actually, a couple other options that are in there. So we just put main transit. Because this is in, I'm not sure where this is. So you can click on satellite, that brings in satellite. You can turn off the labels, and then you can actually bring in the 3D terrain. So again, turn off the labels. or if you want the labels, you can have them, but then it'll bring in the 3D. It's a crude way to get elevations, etc., but in some instances you can get pretty good. We're looking into seeing what happens to get a better elevation data from it. Next item is your DXF. You just basically go out, browse, get your DXF, cloud files, a terrain mesh. If you save a file as mesh, we're going to have some more detailed information on these that will be in the help files and or on the forum. Be sure you always check the forum. And then there's the manage ground visibility. Currently we only have one, but if you add in separate grounds or alternate grounds or different views or something, you can turn them on and off. That allows you some flexibility with being able to see different scenarios or different changes in the roadway. Google Earth, they have a historical where you can bring different views of a scene, and so you could turn one on to show and then turn it differently to show the changes, etc. And then the last is that you can import grounds from another project, and that's just where you go out and grab a ground from another project. Next item is our tracking camera. That's where we got, like on this one, we have a camera which follows the cars. It's where you pan and zoom. Easiest to find information on that. And our help documents. What's new? Traffic cam. Well, we'll just go up to camera. Search. Tracking. Tracking camera dialog. How to make movies with multiple views. That's one that we've recently added, and that talks about it and presents it. There's others that talk about it. Tracking camera dialog, etc. That just tells you some of the information on it. There's a tracking camera demo, which is a little more, but just jumping around the help files will get you information. One of the additions in 3.2 now is that you notice we can name this. So I can actually click on this and call that side view. So now that's a side view, and you'll know the overhead side view instead of just camera 1, 2, 3, 4. Also in that option it talks about how to be along with the vehicle itself, etc. Next item is a very powerful item we have is the charts. It's currently the tire normal forces, but you got your accelerations, and then you can change this by double clicking on that. Let's just say we want to only go to 1 second. See that it shows the accelerations up to 1 second, etc. And you can even set this to 0.5. I'll make that 0.3, 0.7. Then you can go to select chart, and you can add a chart. There's a edit chart, rename chart, and then also you can pick which ones you want to be on your menu up here. There's also different charts for the main, which is the msmac output, which includes 3D elements, but then the V1, V2 are the actual 3D simulation particular to the vehicles. I recommend you take some time looking through this. You can save this as an image or use something like Snagit to grab images when you're looking at charts, etc. This you see is when it's landing the different time history of that. Next item is output files. We had made a point, I for a while wondered why it was so slow. If you put it in print preview, it takes a lot longer. Make sure you have this set to simple view, and then you just go and there's a plethora of information that you can easily look at about the run. The run summary is probably the main ones you'll be looking at are the input echo and the run summary. And the run summary, you see, has the time of impact, time of separation, and then what the delta V, etc. is. Also gives the version, etc. on the top. There's much additional information. Any questions, please let us know. These are just for saving this current frame to an image file or to print. Send it to your printer or save as an image file. We mentioned before about classic mEdit3D. You can click and go out to mEdit3D. Certain functions we haven't added to 3D yet, such as msmac3D, but look for the information on that. That's to be able to look at acceleration from different locations on the vehicle. Grid mode, there's some items that still aren't in 3D graphics, and you just jump out here. Like if I wanted to increase the size of this table from 2 to 4, I just change that. Let's just say I made that to 4 because I want to do something. I say update table, change 2 to 4, yes. I close and I go back to graphics. Do you want that saved? Yes, I do. Now when we go out here, you see that there's 4 items, and you can then modify it to if you wanted to lock or do some steer or something like that. Also on the link here, you can run the traditional graphics, which is our old, it looks a little strange with 3D because this is for 2D SMAC, but it gives you the results from the 3D also. And then a summary of the damage with the 6 points that we use when you're doing automatic iteration. Escape key brings you back. Then also you can run the animation. Good thing to remember is you right click on both of these programs, it brings up a horizontal remote. There's information in the graphics manual help file. You'll see also for Polygon, you can bring up the actual polygon for each vehicle. And if you want to see how the reference vectors and the damage, etc., you can see that too. Help file, there's important forum topics. We haven't been updating that in a while. Hopefully I'll update that before this update goes out. Getting started in SMAC manual are going to be thoroughly enhanced, so make sure you check those out. It's a crash database. We added this. You can go out to grid and access it, or you can access it from here now. Checking for update, you just click and it shows you any announcements and what version you have and what version's available. And then just info about this project if there is. Some projects have additional information, and if you go to that, it'll show you the information on it and talk about things with the project. Next item is our settings. Settings includes a lot of interesting items. You'll see if you look at the path follower demo, you can turn on and off the desired path. If you put in a barrier that adds a line for the barrier, you can change your sky color, zero plane color. You can hide the zero plane color. Obviously in this one it won't make a difference. Text color and background here, down here, the blue and the white. Origins, generally I have them hidden, but you can turn them back on. See if we go on. See there's the origin, and then there's this to give you an orientation. There's a grid possibility. We turn that on, and you can have it if it's X, Y, or Z. There's a grid. Here's the X. The grid. Here's the Z. And you can change that, the increment and the elevation. So whether it's at the ground or above the ground, etc. Logo you can hide. For some reason you don't want that in there. And then if you use the pole option, there'll be a option to hide that pole line. It does a pole line. Ground defaults to 4000, and you can change that to whatever you want. Display, you can also draw the models as wireforms. And then there's an option to keep at least one ground visible, or you can turn that off. Sometimes with meshes, if you bring in a mesh, it's not considered a ground, or something that's not considered a ground, you want to turn off all the other grounds. And that, again, to bring up is that's down here where if you have more than one ground, you can manage that visibility. And this allows you to turn off all of them. And basically what you have up on top here, lights, the ability to change the sun brightness, etc., etc. Editor, the default text editor is Notepad. We use TextPad. Great product, give it a try. And then miscellaneous, the movies, the help menu, Polygon boundary points on model. This is where you can go and vary how it scans the model for that periphery boundary. Next item is about, and that just gives you what version you're using. And generally, the first main is the 3.2 or 3.1 or whatever, but then the date, because some of them, 3.2, we may do a minor refinement or interim updates. VRML is to add in a VRML file. Look in the forum and in the help file for information on this. I think that covers items on the top menu. Before we continue, just wanted to point out you're looking at wireform and a grid that we had put on in the earlier part of this. If we go to the settings down here in the lower left to turn the wireframes off, so now you notice it's now the rendered. And then over here is where the scale grid, we can hide that. Now we're back to normal. Let's move on with the next items of menu, which are everything along the bottom. First two items are to run 3D or 2D. Next item is the initial position. And what that does is bring up just here where then for vehicle 1 or vehicle 2 you can do the position. But we now have a much more efficient way to handle anything and everything to do with the vehicle. Recall we mentioned up here where you can select a vehicle and then change, edit, etc. We've also added where you just click on a vehicle and a menu comes up to the right here. And that menu has various tasks that you can do with the vehicle. And that's for vehicle 1, this is for vehicle 2, but you can also change by selecting here, vehicle 1, vehicle 2. To do specs, you click on that, you can change your specs or go out and grab different specs, or you can actually change and import from a different SI5 file. Then we have the option here, which let me move this over a little so you can see the option here to change the graphics and specs or to change the model only. Sometimes if you have a crash and we tell you go to 3D CAD browser, look for the vehicle, and if you find the vehicle, send us a link to it, and then we'll get that vehicle for you and add it. In the meantime, you can put any vehicle in there, and then you can basically swap out the vehicle, leaving all the specs the same, your recons the same. The only minor change maybe is if you have a rollover, the 3D points that are based upon the actual 3D model might change somewhat. So it's important if you're doing a rollover to probably get the model before you start working a lot in the rollover, because what we call the butterfly effect, small changes can make large changes in rollovers because of different parts of the vehicle hitting, etc. Next item would be changing the color. Picks the top 6 colors on the vehicle and you can change them, and generally the first one is the one for the color of the car. So you could always change this to whatever color you want. You can go and define a custom color, click anywhere and do whatever, and then you just say OK, and then it changes. You notice it's got that different color now. Next item is model scale. The reason we have this is some cars may have something that makes it so that the scaling is incorrect, like large side view mirrors. If it has that, you can then go ahead and go, I would recommend you go overhead if you're doing a change in specs. You go overhead and you can change how that model matches. Again, here's the, and you can change the width, etc. Usually when you add a vehicle, let's go ahead and add a vehicle. If we go back to here, and if we add a vehicle, let's go ahead and add but retain specs. And let's just make that a Cadillac CTS, even though we know the specs would be different. But now in the bottom there, you see it now tells us that that's the vehicle you have loaded in there. The next item that we are going to present is the structural node options. The default for structural nodes for new projects is to just set them based on approximately the vehicle structure. This was the early way we did our structural nodes, and then we made it so they can match the actual vehicle. So this particular sample, you see this is a rollover and it runs to a position of rest. I kind of like the way it works. But it has structural nodes. So now if we look at the vehicle and nodes, you see that they're kind of crudely placed. And so since this is just a sample, it wasn't that much importance. Actually, they're pretty poorly placed. If you're actually working with a rollover, you should click on that node, set structural nodes based on the 3D model. You notice how now it actually immediately jumps to every foot. And so we say, Make sure we double check that that did that correctly. There is a wheel guard also, and let's go ahead and add that and click it again. The only for inputs, the only thing that you'll notice is to turn off the nodes. If you change, if we go to the cards on card 81, this is the coefficient of friction, and generally that should be probably about if your friction 0.4 to 0.6, so 0.5, so let's just say 0.6. Since it's 0.8, 0.75 friction times 0.6, that's probably about 0.5. So for the two vehicles, and this is vehicle 2, the other thing is you might, depending on how many nodes you have, change the default stiffness. The default is 1,000, but probably when you get more points, you want to drop that. And you can try variations in this to get a good match and looking at the vehicle. If it has a negative, that means over here on the vehicle type, again on 83, and if we hit F1, see that has all the inputs here and then a description, just to keep that in mind whenever you're looking at these cards, etc. And then the 0.6 is going to change it. Now this will change the trajectory of the vehicle, so we say OK, and we're going to rerun it. Now we can go ahead and turn off those nodes. Just make it the vehicle, and now when we play it, because there's more structural nodes, there's more interaction with the ground, and also we have a lower friction. I guess to make it a more scientific, let's go ahead and rerun that with the same friction of 0.75 for the nodes. Leave the stiffness different. If we leave that there and we go out and create a copy of this, and we're going to call this node type 1. So we highlight that. We close no path found because we want to go out and we want to change this to a -1, which I could do through the, well, let's go ahead and cancel that. Let's go ahead, click on this, go to nodes and change that back. So we're going to then compare with and without the higher nodes. Now we run this in 3D. This is the familiar sample we have. And now let's bring in, remember with the animulated vehicle, we can bring a CSV path for another vehicle. That's a Chevy Impala. We'll bring that in as a vehicle. And then we want to go get that data set, which is MSoft projects, my first project. Notice that node type 1 is the one we've just done, vehicle 2, so we're going to do my first project number 1. And that brings in all the specs. We want to save that. It loads the specs too. But it just shows you now we can run a definite comparison between the two. They're the same until the hard points start hitting, and then you have a variation of the trajectory the vehicle follows. Let's go ahead and get rid of that point list. I think that's it for nodes. Next item is tire marks. They're tire tracks. Let's go ahead and pull this forward so you see the tire tracks. So let's go ahead to the vehicle 1 and we change that tire tracks to double color versus dashed. And then let's say instead of the blue we want that to be a black. And see, you can do individual wheels. Sometimes in cases you may have, you want to identify which wheel was this wheel. So we know the black is right front, green is left front. Red is right rear, blue is left rear. That sometimes when you have evidence at a scene, you may want to know which tire mark made a mark, and you can do that, or you can make them all the same. You can make it dashed or double color. Of course, that's an option for having, you have to just define the colors more, but then we can make them all the same color very quickly and easily. Next item is positioning, and that's where you actually, a little node comes where you can move it like this, or you can use the adjustments. Let's click on that again. You can use the adjustments to move it left and right. Now, depending on which way you're orientated, those arrows, I usually move them once and move it back. So then you know which direction is this going. So then you know whether it's negative or positive, etc. Then also the heading, and you can change the speeds here. I generally go to the edit here, and then just knowing what these are, that here's your speed and here's your positions, and you can manually change it that way, but visually it also helps. Next item on the list was to show vehicle plus nodes, and just the nodes, and then deform nodes, and then none if you don't want to show the vehicle, sometimes just to show the tire marks. The show glass option, that one is an older model. Some of the newer models have a layer called glass, and that will turn that layer off if you have a layer called glass. And so that way, it's particularly for vehicle fixed. The freeze damage is sometimes with the damage, if there's a side slap, the main damage can look strange, so you just run it to the point of before the side slap, freeze the damage, and then run it through the side slap. You can always use the 2D to look at where the actual damage, etc. is. We're working on an update of that so that this will actually display multiple damage locations in a more accurate way. That should be in an update soon. You can turn off tire tracks. And then the position data, you can turn it on and off if you don't want it down there. And then if you're running 2D, let's just go through and let's just run this in 2D. See now, and I guess the only way to really see this is to go down to ground level. You see the vehicles run as if elevated in the air. They only see the zero terrain. However, when you click on this, you can say follow the terrain for 2D. And we go to that's for vehicle 2, and then go for vehicle 1 to do that also. And then you see it will follow the terrain. Obviously the trajectory will be different because it won't roll. Terrain elevation changes are not seen by the 2D SMAC run, but you get a terrain following. Next item on the vehicle menu is multiple exposure. You see currently it's set up on this particular one at every 10 frames. Now what you have to consider is what is your output time increment. Right now I have 0.03. If you want to show it every 10th of a second, you could run this with an output. And I guess we'll do that just to show you. If we run that every 10th of a second, the integration you still keep at milliseconds. Now if I click and I say multiple every 10 frames, that's going to be every 10 frames times a 10th, that's every second. So we probably want that every 5, so it's every half second. And then we want to do that for vehicle 2 also. And then the only other item we want to do is, do you want to show it after pass or always? And we'll do it after pass so then you can see it as it lays down. So now when we hit play, that's every half second. Now it's running faster than real time because you output every 10th of a second. So if you're going to want it to do it real time, so it shows a generally real time, you put that at 0.03. So as close to a half a second as you can get. First we rerun it, and then we set it to every 16 frames, which is 0.48 seconds. That's for vehicle 1, and then we change that for vehicle 2. And now we go ahead and run this, and you'll see Now this is approximately every half second, 0.48, which is pretty close. Then we can turn it off for each vehicle 1 or vehicle 2, and you notice that it has the ability to make it for only one vehicle, and then to have it up to whatever frame, so you can only show a portion if you want to just show a certain portion. Next item we're going to look at on the lower menu is the target, point of impact, point of rest for iteration or for reference purposes. So we say yes, proceed with this, and then it creates these, and let's go to the overhead for now. Creates positions for impact and rest. Generally, you're going to know your approximate impact location. If you're going to try to use the automatic iteration, and there will be another video on that, be sure to check the forum and the help file. There is already one out there, but we're going to update that, and it may be in this update. First, you want to make sure you're not in contact. You want to back up 1/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second so that they hit. Then during the iteration procedure, it may move it such that the impact changes enough that then they'll be in contact, and you have problems with that. If they're too far away, then the iteration might make it so they miss. So you want to keep it close. Click again down here on the icon, and then you select the impact, and we just move see how it moves the area of what that vehicle is. So you got to know which one is your vehicle 2. So that's our vehicle 1 is this one. So if we go back to that again, just click on that vehicle 1 impact, and if these dialogues don't show up, just click on another one and it'll show up. But see, here's this one. We move that into a position of impact. And then we go vehicle 2 impact, and it looks like that's going to be -90. Now it's got the same, we can zoom in on the heading. And let's just say this particular case, this is not one we would iterate right now. We'll go to the last frame. And so for vehicle 1 rest, again, that's the orange one. You get the idea of how you go and you set these for the impact point, and the rest positions. Then the next thing you do is you bring up the damage, and that's where you would tell, is it on the front, the side, the rear, and then you put a width and the offset, and then you draw the 6 points. Let me go ahead and load one that has that so you can understand this a little better. We're working on the 2018 Watai, which you haven't finished. That may be a demo out there too. But if you look on this one, if we click, so we put in impact and rest of the 2 vehicles. And then for damage, we don't have the measurements yet, so we just kind of put in damage here. That looks like that's a little too far. And then you put in your measurement, you see in the offset. See if you make that offset, see how it can, if the damage is offset from the center of gravity. And then you can go to vehicle 2, and that's on the side and how much. And these are just rough approximations. I'm getting the data for those, but it just gives you an idea. Then if you want to run the iteration, all is required is you click, and I generally recommend you start in 2D and then go to 3D because 2D is much faster. I'm sure this is not, see how the 2D does on this one. Brings up a menu, and you just, if you have prior runs, you would say opt and load the prior one if it's better. Then you just say run, and it gives you what the error. That's pretty high error, but let's just let it run and see what happens. So he's having a hard time getting that rotation, etc. Part of this was we didn't know the weights and the exact dimensions, things like that. So we're getting all that, and we'll fix this. So take a look for it. But to get out of it at any point, you say exit, and it'll say, hey, it's selecting it. And then we exit. And then it shows you the best of show, which is just going to be the same one we already had. But that was just to show you this down here, the target, impact, and rest. And at any time you can hide those. So then when you're running, you don't have to look at them. So you can have that sometimes just when you're iterating yourself, because we recommend for iteration you start with a recon that's getting close at least. Give it a chance, because it's not going to make radical changes to the speeds and positions at impact, and that's all it's changing right now. At some point we're going to add the side slip options and some other things if there's that in your evidence. Next items on the lower menu are just the, for playing, going to start or the last frame. And then walking through. Let's go back to the beginning. Then walking through, you see it moves more. Then you play, you can pause. Loop on and off if you want it only to go once. The scale factor here is for animation speed. You can speed it up. Next, and most importantly, is, let's go ahead and put this back to normal, is making a movie. There's a new video out there for making a movie. But you basically just click and say, do you want to delete, append, or new start, etc. Look at the other thing on doing that, because then you use this to make the MP5. Changing the size, depending on your screen size, you can make it max your screen size, or you also has different screen sizes. It shows you all the options. And when you create movies, it has to be one of these. And then there's also the ability to add lights. We've said we're going to add something on this, and we will soon, but currently you could add a light, and then it asks where you want it. Do you want vehicle fixed? There's all sorts of things. We hopefully will get a how-to video on that out soon. That generally covers everything. Please also look at your help file. Help documents. Getting started has a lot of how-tos, and a lot of this written up. In other words, what's new in detail on graphics enhancements. You go through everything. I'm going to probably add links in that to this video, because I just thought that having a video that can show you, not only can you look at it on the written, but also having a video that shows you the various steps, I think is a way to enhance your use of the software and ability to find ways to do new things in a quick manner. Appreciate you watching. Let us know if you have any questions, comments, and thank you for your support of McHenry Software.